Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here in Mendham. Yes, me again. Alright, so, two videos. So the first one is called something like Nick the Prick, I think. Yeah. So it's a response to the modern mystic, and I know some of you are just, had your fill of that conversation, but I think it's sort of important. I mean, there's not a ton of nihilists in the world, and there's certainly, but there does seem to be a connection between intellectualism and nihilism, and then really, really stupid nihilists. People who are just so damn ignorant that they think it's just about how they feel, and they're just selfish lunatics. And then they're selfish dumbasses. And then there's these intellectuals who have, create a bunch of bullshit rhetoric to try to contrive some reason why somehow it's okay for them to rape, but it's not okay for anybody else to do it, or some kind of nonsense like that. That we're just here to be bugs, and that's all we need to do is just to be our little bug self. And so somehow this relates to some sort of Buddhist and Hindu nonsense where basically it was it's your stoic duty to just show up and be a bug because everybody's depending on you being a bug. There's a whole frickin' machine is dependent on bugs being bugs, generals being generals and corporals being corporals, and everybody salute and do your job and play along because somehow the whole game needs this to happen, because chaos would be just terrible compared to this charming thing we call civilization, which sucks. Anyway, and then somehow if you jump in a fire, it's all okay. You've escaped the monotony. All loony, nutty, stupid, crazy 2,000, 4,000, whatever 1,000-year-old nonsense about life is shit. Go ahead, lay eggs in the shit. Doesn't make any sense. Obviously, the Hinduites are not doing all that fucking well, and the Buddhatodians are also not living exactly the plush and lush life. So, fuck that shit. Anyway, and now, to further do that, he's calling it scientific. Scientific Buddhism. So it's science to recognize that there's no difference in the function of experiencing the difference between red and blue, and the difference between a cupcake and a nail in your eye. It's the same thing. The brain is doing the same thing, so therefore it's the same thing. When obviously, okay, the two things are similar, it's just reflexes, electricity, but there's no similarity, right? I mean, you could travel the universe perceiving blue, blue, blue everywhere, and just go, oh, gee, there's an awful lot of blue, and no big deal. And they could be all red. You go, oh, gee, it's all just shades of red. Okay, so what? But torture forever? Everything torture, 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 horror, horror, torture, torture, versus bliss, 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 fun, fun, fun. Yeah, come on, huge difference. It's not even worth having a conversation about the huge difference. The huge difference is so huge, and anybody who says there's not a huge difference is a fucking crazy kook shit talking, lying, scum sucking pile of crap. So anyway, that's what I point out in the first video, that Nick is a lying scumbag to be talking this rubbish, that he can't tell the difference, that he thinks it's all the same thing and it doesn't make any difference that feelings happen. It's just too fucking ridiculous. And that science says is just adding a perfect insult to the perfect fart industry. It's the shit of the fart. I mean, it's just validating that's all you're about is shit. So anyway, you don't have to watch that. But it is, I could guarantee some measure of entertainment, because it needs to be ripped asshole. It needs to be pulled wide open to see he's just talking shit out of his fucking ass. Anyway, it's not science. So the second video is a little better. I mean, more on the subject that I intended to have with the modern mystic, that there is a I have diagrammed a pretty good story of our evolution, the creation of a me brain, and there are no homunculuses, there's no spirits, there's no souls, there's no any magic. Um, it's just the universe universing, and it does it in this clumpy manner where there's clumps of stuff, and all the clumps are connected because they're all spewing poo at each other. I'm talking and you're listening, so you're being polluted, okay, by my excrement. Just a fact. So yeah, so it's all connected. It's all just one universe doing this crap. But the fact is, it does it in these little clumps, and the little clumps have patterns to them, and they have relationships, and it's all kind of perfectly sensible to describe all of that. Just as it's perfectly sensible to describe mathematically, the number system and say, 2ness plus 2ness can equal 4ness. And it just makes perfectly good sense, and we could figure that out. And yes, it's all deterministic. It's all just the universe universing. But we can see the patterns and see where they're pointing, see where they're heading. So we can do things like make the atmosphere too hot, and we can see the effects happen in the future. And it's, but some of this stuff we can predict and recognize that, okay, things that go up, stock markets and housing bubbles, come down. Okay. We can see trends and possibilities, and we can recognize when we're driving right into a brick wall. We can see the bricks, and see the, cement between the bricks, and it becomes quite visible. Oh, it's a brick wall. It's not paper. We better do something. And we can see the high price paid for our existence, and we can recognize that, we really have to sing and dance really well to justify the price of this production, right? So if you're going to spend $1 billion to produce your play, it better be one hell of a fucking play, because all that money could help people die better, it could help people live better, it could help people, period, and it could help a bunch of animals also. And that's of course, the Ephelist part of this whole story is the realization that consciousness isn't a human-only property, that all the little critters with brains are manifesting some portion of it, and the portion that matters is the feeling stuff, and that happened a long time ago. The feelings happened before the penis, that kind of thing. It's really old, the feeling thing. So let's not pretend that we can just live off of the slaves, the biosphere, all the critters that are caught up in the same game we're playing, and they're the price of us continuing to play the game is their enslavement to DNA evolution, being completely forced into a insidious endless loop of perpetual misery. So, they're really slaves that can't know they're slaves. That, it's like the worst case scenario. They don't even have the opportunity to recognize their enslavement and preserve any of their dignity. But anyway, so that's sort of the conversation. So obviously I'm going to defend that I am scientific, okay, that I'm not I'm not digging up archaic notions of reality and fables and easy narratives, that I'm perfectly capable of arguing the nuances of understanding the mechanical device that is a human being living in a mechanical universe, of what I claim to be the real universe is just electrons and protons being pushed around by a discrete pressurized force. And that's all that's happening. That's the real universe. Everything that happens there first. And we're just really slow, lethargic-y kinds of clumpy, big stuff that's moving really, really slowly compared to the trillions of actions that happen in every second. Whoops, there's a second. Whoops, a trillion things happened, and I didn't. Damn it, I didn't register any of them. I'm just seeing the byproduct of trillions of interactions, which is all of this complicated talking and shit. This whole gooey organism producing little wet eyeballs and waxy ears and ew. Ew. Yeah, that's all part of it. The context of just being machines created by a very long, slow process of evolution, of mixing, okay, of a bunch of checkers, and you throw a billion of them, and the fact is they're going to make shapes, and they're going to, they're going to make designs, they're going to make patterns, and when they make a pattern that can replicate, it'll take over the whole system. It'll consume and reproduce itself into being alive. Yeah, which is a parasite, just consuming. All right. Anyway, and so yes, this is just the bugs with brain argument. The bacteria with brains is the first way I phrased it. But well, that's the better argument because it's frankly bugs already have brains, and so I'm being redundant to say bugs with brains. It just sounds better, but it isn't technically better. So, so for the mystic, paramecium, same as a human being. Paramecium's just less of the same. He's got less amount of apples, but it's still apple. It's just that we're bigger apples, but we're just apples. And it's obviously nonsense. Incredibly complex thing here that's this brain that's creating this bullshit. So the other party's trying to do is pigeonhole me into some defender of souls and spirits and wooey functions, when no, I'm not arguing for any wooey functions. I know that every single thing I'm doing okay, was all pre-ordered by the structure of the universe. That's all causes and effects, and that's it. Every single effect has a chain of causes that goes back, some cases 10 minutes ago, some cases 500 days ago, some cases decades ago, some cases a million years ago. And that's it. And that's the story, briefly. So I wrote a little comment, and it's in the both videos. I recite that comment that I think is relevant to, just trying to explain to him that I'm not making any unscientific arguments. I'm just defending the simple truth that I know from my personal experience. I have lots of robotic functions, but the one that's creating sensations is fundamentally distinctly different than the functions that are blinking my eye, the reflexes that are beating my heart, the functions that are making my guts do whatever my guts goddamn do. That function of this brain has a feature that makes it stick out in a dramatic way. You can't miss the boner of consciousness. It's gigantic in terms of making a difference and such. And it's just ridiculous to have an argument with other conscious beings explaining how being able to feel is completely fucks the game. Okay, it changes everything about it creates value. So the simple argument that I have made over and over again is there's no value in the physical universe, and there's no value happening in it, and your brain had to manufacture a reason for you to give a shit about being eaten by a bear. It had to give you a reason to run, a reason to be passionate, okay, in your function, to passionately try to replicate, put your peg in the hole, and passionately get the resources to do that more often and more effectively. And that's why we feel. is because it does create a immediacy to that the organism can't calculate itself out of. It can't philosophically say, no, I'm not interested. No, I can't do that. It has to do all kinds of tricks to, I mean, my boner's on my head, on my mind. It's like when you're a kid, you have to, you got all these inappropriate boners, and you have to keep trying to figure out a way. What do I think about to, try to get my ape to think about something else? Kind of funny. But that's something, sort of the video kind of got sidetracked by the fact that I kept kind of drifting into the fact that, yes, our life is incredibly interesting, and it's really interesting being a living thing. But if you really think about it and analyze the value, then you understand that, no, it's not worth torturing something for. I know what torture feels like. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I certainly don't want to create it in something else for my benefit. To force something else to, vomit the gruel so I can live a better life or feel better or be more comfortable or any of that horse shit. And I certainly know it's not worth it. It's not worth tormenting any sentient, feeling machine, to make it possible for me to have this delusion of being interested. No, that's bullshit. And that's the real subject. That's the only subject that's worth talking about, is the value subject. The rest of the horse shit about exactly how it functions, do we really have to know every little detail? It's like, do we have to know every detail of evolution? I mean, I could explain why buffaloes look like buffaloes. I explain why cheetahs look like zebras. I mean, leopards. Why... the better example is jaguars, right? Because they evolved completely separate from the African predators, yet they have so much in common. So anyway, that there's patterns that are going to be replicated because they work. It's a good pattern. Claws, teeth, run. Kangaroo rat versus kangaroo. Fundamentally different. Evolved completely independent, and yet rely on a similar function to get around. Well, you could say a rabbit's like a half a kangaroo. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, that's not really the subject. So yeah, so the subject is that, yes, you can get into all this great detail about exactly why our brain does this and why our brain does that and why it does this, and we can do all that nuance with evolution, but you just need to know the basic principle. It's just a programmed computer device, okay? Just reflexes, blah, blah, blah. You get dented by life, you behave a certain way based on how you get dented. Not any more complicated than that. Bing, 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 robot has an experience. We learn from experience, so we become formed and shaped by our life experience. Very interesting, but not miraculous, not not interesting enough to say you can torture shit for one, to make one, to have one, especially when there's so much redundancy. So again, I can go into all the facts that, it's all formula, all the Shakespeare plays, it's all Simpsons did it. The stories are always this underdog, hero, blah, 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 victory in the end, blah, blah. They get finally to score the touchdown, blah, blah. It's the same formulaic bullshit. And so there's nothing new to any of these stories. And the price paid for them is just this monstrous amount of roadkill, so to speak. All of the collateral damage is gigantic. And we're not worth it is the simple statement. It's not worth it. Okay, it's interesting that matter turned into thinking and feeling little blobs of shit, but it's just interesting, and it's not even interesting for a good reason. It's just interesting because we think it's interesting. Just like, you know, vaginas aren't that interesting, without the, you know, the evolution forcing them to be interesting. You only think it's interesting because you've been designed to think it's interesting. So, we can understand how easy it is to fool us into thinking something's beautiful or perfect or desirable when, no, it's not. If it had to fairly earn its keep, it wouldn't be kept. It's not a fair competition. Our biases are built into everything. I could even argue, there's a little part where I was talking about a friend I had as a kid. And, there's always, the bias was that, we were both physically very similar. And it made us being comfortable with each other so much easier. But anyway, so that's enough of an intro. It was a lot of one. And then I'll get to playing some of the second video. I won't bother playing the first video because there's a lot of fuck you in that one. Anyway, and such. Alright, back. Alright, so in the beginning I read a comment I posted on the Mystics video, just trying to make it absolutely clear that you have no right to say I'm not being obedient to science, or what science has discovered in some way or other, or that I've introduced any woo mechanisms in defending my argument. Okay, that it's a far more deserving of interest subject, our capacity to feel good and bad, is far more important a thing for us to concentrate on, because it has a real component of value, where concentrating on how hairs grow on my knuckle, well, okay, there aren't too many, isn't so fucking interesting. Isn't so compelling a subject. We don't really need to figure all of that out, because there's not much at stake. Whether there's 3 hairs or 2 hairs, well, I guess it's not going to make a goddamn fucking bit of difference. But what we do in the world will make a fucking lot of difference. How we behave and what we say and what we talk about makes a huge amount of difference. And if we waste our time talking about hair growing on knuckles and we don't pay any attention to, well, that thing is tortured and suffering and there's a bunch of harm and this is all wasted, okay? A bunch of people dying unnecessarily badly. I mean, we don't pay attention to these subjects, then guess what? We don't do the reasonable thing of moderating the cost of our existence, which is the only sensible thing to do. If you own a car, you have a battery, and it only goes so. You have to moderate. You don't want to waste all the juice spinning your wheels. This is a precious commodity, this capacity to feel, and it needs to be respected as just that. You don't waste this shit. And that's not an unscientific statement. Okay, there's not going to be too many scientists that are going to get away with saying, no, waste it all you want. Doesn't matter. Torture, rape, pillage. Yeah, that's great stuff. No harm there. What's the harm? What, harm? Harm isn't harmful. Yeah, no. What's the problem? Yeah, I mean, that's too ridiculous. So let's see what we are here. Nice. But, even describing the round peg and the whole point. Oh, okay. Yeah, round pegging again. Anyway, yes, that we're just obsessed with stupid little trivial pursuits. Okay, it is Trivial Pursuit. That's what we're playing. And no doubt about it. That's all it is. And yes, it's profoundly meaningful to our little emotional selves, but it's Trivial Pursuit. And the only thing that we should really be paying attention to all the time is how much blood is this thing leaking. Attempt to pretend Yet there's nothing happening here. Right. So that's, the end product is he just keeps emphasizing this point that there is nothing to pay attention to, and it doesn't really matter what you goddamn do. I mean, if you blew up, if you turned yourself into a nuclear bomb and blew up a continent, this guy would say, well, you felt like it. It's no problem. What's the difference? They were going to die anyway, blah, 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 blah. He just wouldn't put any consequence to anything. Now, obviously, that's probably not a very good example because as an ethicist, yeah, I would, sort of make the argument that, yes, you've made the world a better place. So I probably should use some other analogy. But this idea of just waste is the key word. So if you infected people with a disease that slowly kills them, his argument is well, they were just going to waste time doing something else, so they might as well just be tortured because there's nothing better to do. I mean, it's laced in every bit of his rhetoric that somehow it just doesn't matter how miserable your existence is. You somehow have an obligation to live it. Just ridiculous. And to lay eggs. Because nature says so. Except deterministic consequence. So, and there's a ton of this stuff. Anyway, I get into that. Alright, so I continue. Stuff is either absorbed or reflected by the very simple rules. Okay, so I was just talking about the mechanical universe. Electrons, protons, it really is just a push-averse. It's a fact. The little electrons and protons, they don't have any free will. They don't have any random. They don't have anything. They're just pushed around by the wind blowing in the universe, so to speak. The winds of the gravitational and electrical forces. And that's it. And it's all one force, but don't get me wrong. Gravity is the same, all this stuff moving the speed of light, it's all the same fucking stuff, retards. That's why it's moving exactly the same speed, is because it's the same fucking shit. But anyway, it's a very mechanical diagram. There's no pixies in it. There's no Tinkerbells. There's no reason for anybody to accuse me of backsliding into any kind of fable or religion. Change its function. A DNA molecule that's only, that's very short isn't going to be very interesting. So I'm just talking about the fact is it's chemistry, and then the chemistry itself, right? Even when you start making all these different chemicals, you can just make the chemical like a protein, for example, can be a foot long, it could be 50 feet long, it could be a mile long, it could be anything. And it all gets curled up on itself and creates little machines that basically do all these biological processes inside of us. So all the stuff synthesizing other chemicals, it's because of the way these proteins are shaped. And in terms of folding, I guess they're not rolled, they're folded. But anyway, and it's incredibly interesting science. But the real point is that, it just tells you, okay, you have only 100 little atoms to work with, but you can make so many different arrangements of those atoms, and every one of those different arrangements can have unique and distinct properties when thrown into the environment. One arrangement is, arsenic. One arrangement is, dopamine. Twins that aren't conjoined. All right, so now just talking about how, when we evolved, there was this point in the evolution where it went from being just cells, okay, and a DNA molecule, and just nothing that could be called an organ, just something called a chemical organelle. So there was no multicellular organism, just a single cell, a DNA molecule, and a bunch of chemistry. And then that turned into the enslavement of cells themselves to make us. So we're nothing like the living thing we're made out of, really. I mean, we're made out of enslaving a bunch of living things to create all of this stuff. Enslaved liver, enslaved kidneys, all these, and they're basically just clones. They're basically just Siamese twins, some kind of conjoined and it just ends up being conjoined, and then there's one cell that basically tells the conjoined thing to be a retard and to be a this, and you have to be a blacksmith, you have to be a dressmaker, you have to be and it just enslaves all these cells to create this big giant organism to preserve the little zygote, the little elemental sexual cell. And that's all it's for, is that this whole big thing is just here, to dump sperm. Electrical cell, probably like an electric eel, that kind of stuff. Right. So got exploited because it has a key. The first neuron is really the whole story, a big part of the story, a real interesting part of the story, and why brains turned out to be this fascinating feature that could create all this nuance in our behavior, but more important, it could create the nuance of experience. Ooh. Reflexes, just reflexing, and it turns into, I'm here. I'm this brain is experiencing sensations, which is fucked up. It's not running, it's not gooey eyeball. It's, a sensation is just quite different than anything else in the universe. I mean, once you've tasted one, you know you've tasted something. Where you could almost argue that they might get onto something is like a lightning bug, being able to create little flashes of light. All right, so then I went on to say, well, you could think of different ways that you could create some kind of very fast signaling mechanism, transferring information mechanism. But all of them kind of fail, and nature fell on the one that works and it's dependable and it's reliable. But there's only one, one time. There's no other version of a neuron. There's just one version of it, one DNA-coded version of electrical cell to make brains with, and all the things with brains have the same fucking neurons in them. Waiting to be touched, with some word or thought, and I'm going to go boom, I'm going to blah blah blah, right. So I've talked about the triggers and how it's all built out of all the stuff that happens throughout your whole life, and so there's stuff swirling inside of you that's 10 minutes old, 10 hours old, 10 days old, 10 years old, 10 decades old, 10 decades, not, but anyway, and then some of it's just biological, which makes it a million-year-old flywheel that's spinning, trying to generate momentum in a direction to compel you to be an asshole. So there's lots of this, nuance to your creation. And so that's why we have all this variety, and that's why we can't agree on anything, and all the rest of that crap is because of all that nuance, that we all get into the demolition derby in a different way. And even though we're all dented in specific ways, and they never match up as puzzle pieces, you could argue. So it's very difficult to get us to all go in the same direction. There's a bunch of energy in all directions, and it's hard to organize it into one direction. All. And he wants to woo-why. He wants to say this is not high-level perception of reality. So he's making the argument of levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 is the retarded, ignorant religion. 2 is some kind of, I don't know, he won't really say specifically, just implies that if you believe in a self, that somehow you're creating a homunculus or some sort of fake entity that's living inside of you, so it would be like a spirit or a soul. I think a homunculus is a little different than a soul, but regardless, the very idea that there's somebody inside your brain being your brain, or controlling your brain, when no, it's just your brain does all of it. The brain just manifests what you call a you, and I don't think there's anything really wrong with calling yourself an I, or calling yourself a me, or calling yourself a self. Because we clearly do this individually and personally. We don't do it collectively, we do it individually. I can't feel your pain. I can't know your thoughts. I can't experience your thoughts. And that's a key failure in terms of making some idea that it's a collective event, because the only collective part is this part. I throw words at you. I could throw a smell at you. I could fart in your direction. I can do lots of things to send information to you, but it's not coherent enough and not perfect enough to make any claim that we're truly interconnected in some sort of clear Wi-Fi kind of way. We're not. Okay, there's a very low bandwidth of capacity to send information. It's worse than dial-up internet, and so it's kind of ridiculous to say we're networked. We are. We're in one universe. We're all programmed by that universe. We're all structured by the events in that universe. It's just the universing. But it's just kind of ridiculous to say the key ingredient is our connectivity, when the key ingredient is that we're all patterns, and we have a lot of similarities in our pattern. And that should give us some impetus to recognize brick walls when we're driving into one. It doesn't matter. It don't work. All right, let me try to see what I was saying. King of that level, which is just so insulting after all these years. But anyway, and that he's on some 5 level where, yeah, so he's, pretending he's climbing all the way out of the maze to realize that nothing matters and it's all just beepity beep beep boop boop boop, and red is the same as bliss and blue is the same as torture. When bullshit. Absolute bullshit. I mean, it's just that fucking stupid, and that is what he's arguing. It is of no consequence. Yeah, okay. I have a right to fairly argue that isn't higher level thinking. So that was sort of the end of that comment. So it took me a whole video to read the comment. Anyway, yeah. So the argument is look, real science, real objective as a possible analyzing of our bug lives is going to realize they're just bug lives. We're bugs that can sing and dance. We think singing and dancing is really cool, but it's really not. Okay, and it's not worth squishing feeling organisms to sing and dance. If you can't make your organ music without squishing, torturing stuff, then you're not allowed to play the tune. As your life progresses, it just narrows into this little tiny nothing, where you got almost the coffin. Yeah, so I was just talking about the fact that as you're young, everything's opened up and there's all kinds of possibilities, and then it just starts narrowing and narrowing and narrowing and puts you right into your grave. It's just it's a funny metaphor for me anyway. I found it charming. Just the idea, it had the same kind of theme in it, in terms of these relationships that change you. Right, so I ended up talking, unfortunately. The video's 2 kinds. It's, Jekyll and Hyde kind of a video. Okay, so the first part of the video, I'm trying to talk about the science part. And then the second half, I wanted to get in. I ended up getting into, with the real, the visceral feeling stuff. And all of that is based on all this emotional crap. And all this emotional crap is based on all of these little life experiences that charm the fuck out of you or horrify you. And, it's so poignant, some of it. It's so ooh. It's just funny how you're more distant from that part of life where you were so much more alive, but you're so much more capable of appreciating it when you can't live it anymore, kind of a thing. And it's just so, ouch. it's this beautiful, painfully beautiful, that kind of experience where something's painfully beautiful. And because it invokes desire and wish and want for those days, that nostalgic thing. And, ew. It's a horribly beautiful feeling. It's like one of those sad movies, the tear jerker. It's like you're glad you saw it, but it was painful and it was uncomfortable, and but you're the sense of underdog, or the stoic part of you, just finds it just so powerfully moving, okay, for because of the statement it's making. But it's all emotional crap. They're going golfing, doing this, doing, all these little things. Okay, so I was just talking about my relationship with my father a little bit, and, just because it came into mind, in terms of these controlling events in life and these relationships in life and all of that stuff, and how it's hard to be separated from that world, to be, heading for the coffin. I'm occupied with the struggle of, getting the government not to harass us, and yeah, so there's just so much bullshit in existing, and you have to waste so much time on all of these little tiny bullshit things, and it's just, wow, fuck this. I mean, for that alone, people should just say, oh, let's just fuck it, because obviously we can't do any of this in any kind of efficient manner. Everybody's a schemer, everybody's cheating, you can't trust a cop, you can't trust anybody. It just sucks. Who the fuck wants to live in a world where you can't trust nothing? Because that's what made a difference between just machines and now machines that produce this function of being capable of being harmed. it's just so profoundly significant. It overwhelms any other technical subject. The creation of a valuable experience in the universe is the brightest light you could make. It's not possible to reasonably deny the significance of the event. Human, adult human. So I was just saying that, there wasn't any. A lot of movies have this idea of some mentor or something, that muses you in your youth or something. And for me, there wasn't any adult that did that, but I did have a friendship that was just, it was rich, in terms of an experience. And it's just storytelling, and it really isn't anything. And it could have been about anything, and it wouldn't matter what. Yeah, so we're all driven just to do the stupid put your peg in the hole. And there's this mechanical alpha, beta bullshit, this competition thing. All of this stuff generates all this idea of this conquest and winning and getting somewhere. And all of that is an illusion, because the only place you're going to get is dissolved. And it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be just an ugly failure, a complete and utter failure in the end. It all breaks into pieces and scatters to the wind. And that's enough of a tragedy right there for a reasonable person to say, I ain't going to do that over again. I'm not going to make something beautiful just to smash it. So anyway, that's the end of the video, pretty much. Okay, so if I say something at the end here I think I liked, So maybe I'll see if there's a little tiny bit of it there. I could have been a contender. Yeah, no, that's not it. But anyway, yeah, so that's enough of a video. So yeah, 2-hour-long videos. So plenty of content to keep you distracted. Plus this 45 minutes, right? So people shouldn't complain that there's not enough, of me doing this stuff in your direction. But anyway, yes, I do have to work on doing it more proficiently. Yeah. So anyway, creating a more compelling persona. I mean, I really wish, Anthony Hopkins is so good. I mentioned just because it was in some movie that I referenced just because it, but anyways, it's just, you're just like, oh yeah, I mean, I wish I could be Richard Burton or Anthony Hopkins or, and then, you would have to listen because I would have just so much charisma that you just couldn't not listen and pay attention and feel every word, have it just, pull on your guts. But yes, I have a limited capacity, unfortunately. So anyway, till the next time and such and so forth and whatnot. And let's I'll keep, until like, yeah, do the best I can, apparently. I mean, I am, devoted, and I am, kind of obsessed, and I do spend a significant amount of time contemplating and constructing and thinking. So, the fact that I'm failing, sometimes, practice doesn't make perfect. But I'll work on it some more. Anyway, till the next, I can't, whatever. I can't, this is all I have is my simple bug functions. I just don't, I wish I could show up and do the Superman thing, but I just can't. I have to do some other kind of thing, to get the right outcome. I have to do this political thing, this persuasion thing. I can't just fly over there and fix it. Anyway, till next time and such, so forth and whatnot. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah.